Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm bringing you my recommendations for the readathon Springathon. So for those of you who don't know, Springathon is a nature writing readathon that I'm co-hosting that is happening for the first 2 weeks-ish of May. I will link the announcement video as well as all the information down below, as well as my wonderful co-host, so you can check out everything there. But even if you're not doing the readathon or the readathon has been and gone, these are just some great nature writing books. All of them are non-fiction that I just think are fantastic and wanted to sort of bring more attention to. So the 4 prompts for Springathon are the 4 seasons, so spring, summer, autumn, winter, and I've got 3 books for each one of the categories. The first prompt is spring, and the first book I want to recommend for that is Otherlands by Thomas Halliday. This is a really comprehensive look at life on our planet, and for me I thought it was a good fit for spring because spring is often the beginning of the year and this is talking about the beginnings of life, so I thought that it would be a fun one to go for that one. This is a fantastic book if you're interested in paleontology. It's going to give you a really comprehensive look back from like sort of prehistoric mammals, things like woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, all the way back through the various different periods there have been until we literally get down to like singular cell organisms in the ocean. Naturally, by doing that, we're going to breeze through the dinosaurs, who are a massive part of it, but you're also going to get to hang out with weird things like the Cambrian period and trilobites and the Carboniferous period with gigantic insects and all sorts of really cool weird things. So if you're someone who has been like dipping their toe into paleontology but rarely branches out beyond dinosaurs, or if you're obsessed with walking with dinosaurs like me as a kid and you want to check out a book that's going to go into more detail and more breadth, this is definitely the one for you. Halliday has a lovely writing style. It's really lyrical and he's really interested in painting a picture. So it's slightly lighter on the science compared to some, and really is looking at kind of the animal behaviour and painting this really scenic route, which I think is what really sort of captures it for the nature writing, not just necessarily science writing. Now for me, spring really is all about bringing that greenery back into our world after the very sort of bleak kind of browns and whites of winter, and so I thought a perfect book for that would be The Secret Life of Trees by Colin Tudge. I mean, this cover alone just absolutely screams spring, doesn't it? Now this is a book about trees. It is a really excellent read. It's a while since I actually read it, so I can't remember a crazy amount of detail about it, and I did only give it 3 stars, I think because I just found it quite dense in the middle, because I'm not someone who knows a crazy amount about plants and is not really like a planting gardening type person, but I do remember enjoying good chunks of it. And also if you're someone who is into nature or wants to learn a bit more, this is definitely a great place to start. And with a cover as beautiful as this, it would be remiss of me not to mention it for spring. One that is a firm favourite and I recommend every Springathon. It gets mentioned in so many of my videos because more people really need to read it, and that is Waterfall of Stars by Rosanne Alexander, My 10 Years on the Island of Skoma. This is a memoir, or sort of a piece of nature writing about her time on the island of Skoma, being a warden of the island with her husband, which is a little island off the coast of the UK, and there has always got to be somebody on it basically to help with like the scientists come and do research, but also just be kind of a warden for the animals and check everything's going okay. You're gonna have puffins and seals galore, to mention just a few of the crazy animals in here, and the reason why I think it's so fitting for spring is, for me, the most memorable scenes in this were in the springtime when she does describe that transition from the bleak to suddenly colour coming back into the life. It has some of the most beautiful passages of nature writing I've ever read and is completely iconic for a reason. It is a fantastic book that more people should read. The next prompts are for summer, and for me summer really is about 2 major words. It is about colour coming back into our world, and it is also about insects coming back into our world. For me, picnics in the summer is always going to be combined with ants and wasps and bees and all those other things, but also nature walks are going to be filled with butterflies and all sorts of colourful stuff. So that is the main focus for my picks. The first one is Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake, which with a cover as bright as this, of course I'm going to be mentioning it for summer. This is about fungi, or mycelium to give them the more technical term, which is sort of a weird hybrid, not quite plants, not quite animals, God knows what they actually are, and it's an incredibly detailed and really interesting look at mushrooms, what we know about them, fungi, how they work, and the various different uses that we're finding for them. I read this for Springathon a couple of years ago and it was absolutely a favourite read of mine. I think Merlin Sheldrake has a really excellent way of writing, a really clear handle on his information, and imparts the information in a really clear, concise, scientific writing kind of way. So definitely check it out if you're a fan of science. I think this one is a complete slam dunk. My next two picks are both about insects, the first one being Extraordinary Insects by Sverdrup-Thygeson. I read this for this first ever Springathon and it is just jam-packed filled with information. This book is so freaking cool because insects are so freaking cool, and I definitely think they're something which we can kind of forget about in our world, especially with nature writing and biology books, because mammals and birds and reptiles are all just there and they're all so big and interesting and exciting, but insects are really freaking cool and crazy weird. So this book is fantastic if you're a complete beginner in this area like I was when I read it, and really just going to kind of be a great jumping point for all the different interesting things that you can learn about them, because wow, it gets strange. One that is a little bit more nature writing compared to sciencey about insects is Rainbow Dust by Peter Marren. This is specifically about British butterflies and also butterfly collecting. So it does discuss sort of the sort of craze that was butterfly collecting for a period of time in Britain. This is way before my time, and also the way that butterfly collecting was seen as something which was quite feminine and an option for women getting into the sciences when they were barred from lots of other areas. So you get a little bit of like a history of science and a history of ideas in there. Then it also does talk about British butterflies, their wildlife, and kind of how that's being compromised. So you do get a lot of that lovely nature writing and a lot of reminiscing from Peter's own childhood, because he was an avid butterfly collector. So he's got some fun anecdotes there. This was a real early pick for me for nature writing, and again was one of these early books that cemented that I really enjoyed nature writing and thought that it was definitely worth checking out. So fantastic little read, a lovely sort of across different genres. Like I say, you've got a bit of history, you've got a bit of science in there. It's really kind of multidisciplinary book, which would be good if you're a bit of a like a omnivore polymath like myself. Now we are moving into autumn, and for me autumn is all about harvest season. So each one of these books is focused on harvest in some way. The first one of those is The Triumph of Seeds by Thor Hanson. Thor Hanson is a fairly big science writer. He's also written books on bees and feathers, neither of which I've read, but I've heard very good things about if you are interested in those areas a bit more. Seeds is how grains, nuts, kernels, etc, etc conquered the plant kingdom even, and shaped human history. Seeds, it talks about when they first developed and kind of evolved, and what the various environmental pressures we think were on that for why that happened, because plants haven't always just been as they are. They also had to evolve just like all other life on our planet. So it's really interesting to see when seeds as a feature developed, and then also the various ways that human beings have interacted with seeds over the years, because they definitely form a cornerstone of our evolution, our ability to do things like agriculture. So this is a fantastic, really interesting sort of combo paleo history science book. If you like this, you should also totally check out Tamed by Alice Roberts, which is about the 10 species of plants and animals that we have either domesticated or cultivated over the years, and is also a fantastic read and would be a really great companion to this book. Then I have Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge and the Teachings of Plants, and it's a collection of essays looking at plants and, like it says, Indigenous wisdom. So Robin is actually Native American. I can't remember which part she belongs to, but this is a series of essays looking at how her culture interacts with the natural world, and it's just again some really lovely nature writing. Harvesting definitely features a lot in it, but a lot more of a like down to earth, back to Mother Nature kind of energy, rather than sort of massive corporate consumer like mass produced stuff that we'd have to do these days to kind of meet demands of populations. And it was just really beautiful and very lovely writing. It got a bit samey for me at the end. I do struggle with essay collections, but if you're somebody who quite likes an essay collection, this is definitely like a slam dunk. You'll really enjoy it. And she also has another book called Gathering Moss that I've not personally read, but my mate Harry absolutely raves about. So there's another option for you if you're not bothered by this one in particular. Then I have This Is Your Mind on Plants by Michael Pollan. Hilarious that his surname is Pollan. This is about opium, caffeine and mescaline, and it is kind of 3 long form essays in one. For me, I found the opium and the caffeine ones the most interesting. The mescaline happens during COVID, so it isn't the most interesting because he doesn't get as much hands-on, but they are basically, it looks at plants that have really shaped human history. The caffeine one is especially interesting because it is such a highly addictive substance that we do not regulate even slightly, and every person I think on this planet is probably fairly hopped up on it. So that was an incredibly interesting part of this. Now, Michael does a lot of these things are about him doing something, some kind of experiment, whether it be growing poppies to try and make opium tea, or cutting himself off from caffeine for a bit to kind of go on a total detox, and he can be a little bit invasive and sort of irritating at times. But the actual sort of science behind the opium and the caffeine and sort of their place socially and culturally is incredibly interesting. So I do think it's still worth a read, even though I didn't find him as enjoyable as I would have hoped. And the final prompt is winter, and for that I've got 3 with quite different sort of takes on the term. So the first one is Seashaken Houses by Tom Nancollas. This is about rock lighthouses, which are lighthouses that are specifically out in the sea, can only be got to by a boat of some sort. And for me, I thought this was an interesting one for winter because so many of the descriptions in this were of these really cold, blustery nights with storms raging, and it really was such a like chilling atmosphere that it definitely reminded me of winter. This is a really interesting book if you like history, and also you've got that idea of like man versus nature, man versus the elements, of people determinedly trying to build lighthouses against the ocean for the sake of like human safety. It does get a little bit samey because, let's face it, there's only so many rock lighthouses you can learn about before they all start to sound the same, because it's a tower in the sea. There's not a crazy amount of difference, but it is quite a fun read, quite short, and I thought I wanted to like throw in something a little bit different. Kind of, it's nature writing, but for me, I think nature writing quite often gets lumped in with your like long walks, lots of greenery, plants and animals, whereas I wanted something a bit more bleak and barren for winter, and I think that this is such a perfect read for that, and it's incredibly atmospheric in places. Then I think of winter as sort of a closing at the end of the season, and many things like cutting back and dying off, and an amazing book about nature and grief is The Way Through the Woods by Litt Woon. This is overcoming grief through nature, and Litt Woon talks about the loss of her husband when he was quite young and early on in their relationship, and then how she basically overcame grief and sort of worked through it by finding mushroom foraging. This is a great combination with Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. I actually have a video where I talk about both books in more detail, which I will link somewhere, and this I believe was the book club pick for Springathon back in 2021, so it was an absolute slam dunk read. It is beautiful. You learn so much about mushroom foraging, but Litt Woon also just has this wonderful, lovely lyrical writing style and a really sensitive, thoughtful approach to grief and sort of what her emotions were at the time, and then how mushroom foraging and kind of nature in general helped to pull her back from the brink as such. So it is a double whammy of beautiful writing, but also you're going to learn a lot about mushrooms, which is very cool. Mushroom foraging has surprising amount of like regulation attached to it, or maybe even not surprising if you think about how lethal some of them can be if you get it wrong. And then the final book I wanted to recommend, which I thought was just so perfect for winter, because let's face it, our perfect winters have lots of snow and ice. We don't always get them, and one that is all about ice is Jon Gertner's The Ice at the End of the World, an epic journey into Greenland's buried past and our perilous future. This is sort of a double whammy of a bit of a history book, a bit of a science book, a bit of a nature writing book. Actually, that's a recurring theme on this. I don't do just straight nature writing a lot of the time. There's normally some kind of like historical scientific slant to what I pick up. But this one is about some of the early people who journeyed to Greenland and sort of explored it, how they met the native populations there and what their experiences were. And then later down the line, how we set up scientific, well, like not plants, but like centres or like study areas, whatever, and then drilled in and took the ice out so that we can learn stuff about our planet and about specifically our planet's climate change over the years and the secrets that are buried in the ice. I think this is incredibly accessible. It's got quite a lot of science at the end, but I do think that Jon does a really good job of building it up. And the nature writing bit at the beginning, again, if you are looking for nature writing but not just pretty flowers and lots of lambs running around, but you want, like, you know, man versus the elements, people being very cold and very sad in icy places, this is definitely going to be up your street, because there's some really harrowing stories at the very beginning as these early travellers, and so you get to learn a lot about early expeditions into ice and sort of how that went. So yeah, really great book all around. So there you have it. Those are my recommendations for Springathon specifically connected to the prompts. I'd love to see your TBRs and also know, like, how are you particularly wording these prompts? Do you think that these all fit? I feel like some of them were a reach, but I think that's the joy of a readathon, is making the prompts fit what you want to read anyway. I also am going to be putting out some general recommendations videos for things like books about plants and some other stuff around nature that is not specifically tied to the prompts of Springathon, but to give you ideas of where else you might be able to go, and that is going to include some fiction. So do let me know in the comments down below, are there particular areas of nature writing that you'd love to hear from me? Like I said, I've got a non-fiction and a fiction about plants coming up fairly soon, but are there other areas in particular that you want to know? Do you want me to see if I've got enough to just do an insects book, like books video? Do you want me to see if I've got something for any other area? Like what would you like from me over the next couple of weeks in honour of Springathon? Also do let me know in the comments down below, have you read any of these? Are any of them making it onto your TBRs? You know the drill, we know what we're doing here by now. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.